Howdy y'all, welcome back. It's been a minute since I recorded lesson 7. Now we're continuing our religious quest on lesson 8, and this quest is taking a bit of a different turn now. So up till now we've mostly done theory and method, and I've still got a little piece here that I'm going to do. We've still got some theory and method that we're going to go throughout the course, but basically each unit going forward we'll do a little bit of theory and method and then focus on one religious tradition. And just to sort of explain the theory and method behind my theory and method. So we've already done the phenomenological method. And as you know, the phenomenological method entails, viewing a phenomenon from various perspectives. And one of the points that I want to emphasize is that whatever thing we're looking at, it's going to look different based on the method that we're using. In other words, different methods are various lenses, right? Like looking through a telescope or looking through something with binoculars or looking at something through, a microscope or using a chemistry stat. There's lots of different ways to study things, different methods to study things. And so what we're going to do is learn various methods or lenses as we go through, and we're going to apply these different methods to different religious traditions. The idea being that, we're going to study, for example, Judaism through the sociological method, in a particularly narrow way of using the sociological method. And then we'll use ethnographic method to study Islam. We'll use eco-anthropological method to study Buddhism. The point is that we could use any of these methods to look at any of these traditions, and each method is going to show us a different side, right? Ideally, we would use all of these methods to study each one, but we can only do so much in a limited world religions course. So the idea is to give you not only a taste or a sense of each of these religious traditions and learn a little bit about them, but also emphasize how little we're learning about each one, right? So we're just looking from this narrow lens at each of these traditions. So that's one aspect. That's why we're using various methods to study various religious traditions. Another aspect of it, though, is that we've learned Wilfred Cantwell Smith, right? And we've seen in the theory and methods section that religion doesn't exist. Religion is a construct that's made up by scholars, particularly Max Mueller, in the science and study of religion, dating back to the 19th century. And there is no such thing out there as religion. It's not like studying, oak trees. Oak trees, you can go and you can look at an oak tree and you can study the oak tree and you can dissect it and you can vivisect it and you can study it in context with other trees and that sort of thing. You can't do that with religion. Religion doesn't exist, right? But there are religious people. And as Wilfred Cantwell Smith emphasizes, when we use the word religion, we primarily mean it in two different ways. One is what he calls cumulative traditions. So, historical traditions which change over time and build over time. And under that heading of historical cumulative traditions, you have scriptures, you have practices, you have rituals, you have all sorts of things, right, that have been done over centuries or millennia or just decades or whatever. And you can study those traditions from historical perspective, from a ritual perspective, all these sort of things. But you're studying concrete things that have been done over time, that have accumulated, right? Traditions that are accumulated over time. So that's one way that we can mean the word like Judaism, right? Or the Jewish traditions that have continued over time. And so in the following sections, we're going to begin with a section on theory and method. Then we're going to look at each one of these traditions using one of those methods. So in this case, we're going to use a sociological method and look at Judaism and give a quick overview of the cumulative tradition, but a very quick overview, the scriptures and traditions and things like that. But that's really just a framework, right? That's just a snapshot. Yeah. So what we want to do is look at also that other aspect that Wilfred Cantwell Smith describes. Religion is also something personal, a personal aspect, a personal faith. And each human person is different. So each Jewish person is different. Each Jewish person is going to have different ways of expressing and understanding their religious tradition. And even moreover, people change over time, right? A 5-year-old doesn't understand his or her religious tradition the same way that they do when they're 15, which is still different than when they're 25, which is still different than when they're 45, and still different than when they're 85, right? So people grow and mature, and their understandings of their own religious traditions change over time. The idea is we're going to look at this sort of broad overview of Judaism. Then we're going to narrow our focus to look at one particular Jewish person, namely Matisyahu, this reggae rapper. Well, he kind of defies a lot of genres. So I think he's as you will see, his career has taken. He's gone through lots of musical changes throughout his career and evolved and changed in many different ways. And likewise, his faith, his understanding of his own Jewish faith and his practice of his Jewish faith has changed over time. And so the idea is by looking at his music and his career, again, just looking at pieces of it in a brief sort of way, then we get a sense of how one Jewish person from our contemporary time period, has understood their Jewish faith and practiced their Jewish faith in various different ways throughout the course of his life. And of course, if we were to talk to him and interview him, which would be dope, then we would learn still more about how he's understood his tradition. We can also see Matisyahu is great because we get to see various traditions like Chabad Lubavitch and Kabbalah and different Jewish traditions within the current context. So that's the idea. Then we're going to do the same sort of thing for Islam. We'll do the ethnographic method, then we'll look at an overview of Islam, and then we'll focus on one Muslim, namely Rumi, and look at his poems and look at a little bit the Sufism through the lens of Rumi. Then we'll do the same thing with Buddhism. We'll look at the eco-anthropological method, then we'll look at a quick overview of Buddhism, particularly the life of the Buddha, narrowing in on the life and teachings of the Buddha, and then again looking at a contemporary figure in Pakru Pitak and how he practices and emulates the Buddha and practices his Buddhist faith through his Buddhist tradition. So that's just a quick intro to Lesson 8, and really this next major unit of the course as we change directions over from the theory and method to looking at particular religious traditions going forward. I hope you enjoy it. Peace.